My name's René Syler. I'm the former co-host of the CBS Early Show. In late 2006, I was fired from my job because in television, they often make changes.
Losing her job was just the start of a series of life-altering changes for René.
A month later, I made a decision to have a preventive mastectomy. My mother and father were both breast cancer survivors, and I was at increased risk for the disease. And about a year later, I was out on a book tour and I ended up getting sick on a plane. And I was hospitalized and pumped full of medication and then ended up losing my hair.
René says when everything seemed to be going wrong, that's where she finally found her strength.
So as hard as the things the past 10 years was for me, I had this quantum growth.
And through it all, René remains focused on what she's gained.
I lost my job, I lost my breasts, I lost my hair, and in all of those things, crazy enough, I found myself.
I have always admired René's resilience and her ability to keep it going and keep growing. Please welcome someone who was the first, but she made sure she wasn't the last, and that's why I'm in this seat, René Syler. Welcome to...
You're gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
They're gonna cry. You know, it's true. I mean, for years, clearly, I would watch you. We were both in Dallas, Fort Worth. I was on a CBS station. I was a reporter. You were an anchor midday. And I remember hearing René Syler is going to be on CBS Early. She's going to be the first Black woman to anchor a network morning show. Mm-hmm. It was like magical. When you learned, René, that you were the first, after all these years in morning network TV, the first Black woman, did it resonate with you, the importance of that?
It didn't resonate with me, and I think a lot of times, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, when you're the first, you were literally in there treading water as fast as you can, right? And you're keeping it all cool above the surface, but underneath you're like, oh my gosh, right? So you don't really have an opportunity to really understand the path that you're paving until sort of after. And then you look back and you think, oh, wow, that was pretty cool,
right?
What I did.
It was, you know, and in addition to it, you always had a very strong outward identity. You always kept your hair curly. You always kept it authentic. And people will know when you start going to the network, the first thing they do, they put you in someone's office who tells you to do something to your hair. You're like, but you hired me looking like this.
Yeah.
And suddenly they want to change everything that made you special in the local market.
Right. So they hired Coke and they want to turn it into milk. Is kind of how I look at it. They're like, wow, she's so fantastic and she's so great. Let's tone her down.
Let's tone her down.
And
right.
you're like, wait, how does that work? So for me, the hair loss thing was the last, and you understand this as a Black woman, especially in TV news. You had the anchor bob, you had to fit right in. Oh, you couldn't have hair like this because it was distracting.
Right.
And then after I have a daughter who has curly hair, and I thought, what lessons am I teaching her about, loving yourself when I'm beating the curl out of my own hair?
Yeah.
So.
And women at home were watching you and saying, I want to look like René Syler.
Good luck. Because, first of all, this is not what René Syler looks like.
Well, the TV persona of us, right? Because if you see it, you believe you can be it. You were, and I were in Dallas, Fort Worth. I always tell the story. Iola Johnson was the first Black woman to anchor the local news in Dallas, Fort Worth. My dad said, if you get your grades up, you could do that too. And I was like, well, I'm not getting my grades up, and I'm still going to try to do that. But, if you see it, you believe you can be it. But here you were with this fairy tale job, and then I remember distinctly you leaving, you being fired, and you openly saying, which gave me the courage when I was let go. Trust me, I thought about 7 versions of the story I might tell the public, and I'm like, well, I was fired.
When you tell your truth, you take away the power in people's ability to twist the story.
Right.
So I was like, first of all, I was not the first person to be fired from any job.
Right.
And definitely not the first person to be fired in television. In fact, if you haven't been fired from a job in TV, you haven't been in TV long enough.
Yeah, right.
And so I felt like saying that, there was no shame in that for me. It didn't work out. Things don't work out. You move on. You take the lessons that you learned and you keep moving. And that's really how I've approached my entire life.
After you were fired, you went on to explore another side of your life that is so often ignored when we were pursuing these careers, which is parenthood and what it looks like. You had commuted to do the early show from Texas to New York.
Yeah.
And you had children.
Yeah, young children.
Young children at the
Yeah.
time.
I was ready to get away from them. No, I'm kidding. No, but they were young. My daughter was in kindergarten and my son was in, preschool. Nobody ever questions men when they do something like this. But a mother, what? You're gonna leave your kids for your job? You know, when I became a mother, I didn't stop being René Syler.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I still had dreams, I still had goals, I still had aspirations. And just because these two people came crashing into my life, who I love to death, it didn't mean that I had to give all that stuff up.
Which is why you wrote later on in the book, A Good Enough Mother. And that resonated. Were you expecting to have that second act?
I wasn't really planning on it or expecting it, but what I have learned is that life is a series of acts. And it's not just a second, a third. I think I might be in my 237th act. But you know, the thing is, and for people who are watching this and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm at the bottom. The bottom is an amazing place from which to grow. Right. And I always say the life you plan is not the life you lead. You gotta take what you can from your last act and bring it into your second act. If it's a building that imploded, you take the good bricks and you rebuild.
Yeah. You know, this is why I love you. Just dropping knowledge constantly. You know, as I said, this show is about the first, but making sure, more important, that you're not the last. Something that my parents instilled in me, something I know you're putting in your kids. How did you make sure, okay, I'm the first in this building, but I will not be the last?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to give you props because, as you said, you know, you looked up to me, but there are people who are doing the same to you and saying, well, if Tamron Hall can do it and she's opening doors, right? The second thing is, you know, I just admire, I knew you were a great communicator, I knew that. And so none of this surprises me, with you at the helm. But in terms of making sure you're not the last, I think it's incredibly selfish to think, let me get in there and then slam the door behind me. What good is that?
Right.
That's not even fun.
Right.
So I mentor, I talk a lot, I tell my truth because there is no shame in any of the things that I've done. So I'm not really trying to hide that from people. And that's where people are attracted by your authenticity.
Thank you. You know, oh gosh.
Girl, if you cry, I'm crying, so don't.
No, but because you keep it so real. I mean, from your health, with the mastectomy, all of that, including you were recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
I know, right? I'm like the Job 2.0. Right? And so, because I'm a natural communicator, I really feel like this is my next act, is to talk to women about, don't let life beat you up so bad that you ignore yourself.
And your kids are now in their 20s.
They're still, where are they? Yeah, they're 23 and 25. My son's 23.
And when you look at this journey, including this next act and bringing more awareness to women and our health, how do you describe it? How do you describe what you feel like now?
Keep going.
Keep going.
You just got to keep going because tomorrow is a new day.
It's a new day. It's a new day. Well, I love you. Thank you so much for being the first, for making sure you are not the last.